Water is the one resource no living thing can survive without. And the wealthiest people on Earth are quietly buying all of it. Behind closed boardroom doors, a new asset class emerged, one with no substitute. Billionaires aren't talking about it publicly, but the transactions tell everything. Climate change is not a warning to them. As water grows scarce, it becomes power, and they are positioning at the source. When the taps run dry, who controls what comes next? That answer was already decided by people whose names you barely know. Names like Gates, Pickens, Buffett, Resnick, all holding water assets worth billions, all bought quietly, years before the crisis headlines began. Farmers who've worked the same land for generations are selling not because they want to. The water beneath them was already bought first. Blue gold, that's what they call it in the prospectuses. The ones they don't put on their websites. While aid workers struggle to provide it, investment funds are pricing the exact cost of that need. A centuries-old natural right, the commodification of life is complete. Bolivia's water war of 2000 was a warning the world briefly heard. A company tripled prices overnight, people rioted, a man was killed. 24 years later, the same model is back. Quieter, bigger, better funded. Microsoft, Google, Meta, all secured long-term water contracts. 50-year agreements at today's prices. Thames Water, London's private supplier, collapsed into near insolvency while paying out $2.7 billion in dividends. Monterrey, 5 million people, Mexico's wealthiest industrial city. In 2022, it had water for 8 hours every 3 days and was days from complete collapse. Has legal teams already building extraction frameworks? The billionaires are buying the water, but they don't own the movement. Both futures are visible from here, the green one and the cracked one. Both are being built simultaneously. We're willing to fight for every civilization that rose and fell on its banks. The question is not whether water will survive us. Water is the one resource no living thing can live without. And right now, the wealthiest people on Earth are quietly buying all of it. Not oil, not gold, not land, water. Behind closed boardroom doors, a new asset class has emerged, one that has no substitute, no synthetic replacement. Billionaires aren't talking about it publicly, but the transactions tell the entire story. Climate change is not a warning to them. It is a roadmap. As water grows scarce, it becomes power, and they are positioning themselves at the source. This isn't philanthropy. This isn't conservation. This is the largest quiet land grab in modern history, and it's happening right now, beneath the surface, literally. When the taps run dry, who controls what comes next? The answer to that question has already been decided by people whose names you barely know, and agreements you were never meant to see. Before the public understood what was happening, the deals were done. Aquifer rights, river access, desalination contracts, quietly purchased, legally secured, continent by continent. In the world's poorest regions, a single tanker truck means survival. In the boardrooms of the world's richest cities, it means margin. That gap between desperation and profit is exactly where this strategy lives. Water investment funds have outperformed gold for 6 consecutive years. The smart money understood the equation early. Scarcity plus dependency equals limitless leverage. This is not a prediction. It already happened. Farmers who've worked the same land for generations are selling, not because they want to, because the offers are too enormous to refuse. And because quietly, the water beneath them has been bought first. History tells us what happens when water is mismanaged. The Aral Sea, the Colorado River, the Ganges, but this time the mismanagement is intentional. This time it's being engineered. It's not conspiracy, it's documented. Names like Gates, Pickens, Buffett, Resnick, all holding water assets worth billions, all bought quietly, years before the crisis headlines began. When municipalities run dry, they buy from private suppliers. When agriculture fails, food prices follow. When food prices rise, civil order fractures. Every step of that chain is already owned. 2 billion people already live in water-stressed regions. By 2050, that number nearly doubles. The investors who bought the water know these numbers by heart. They paid for the models that produced them. Desalination is the new oil refinery. Enormous capital cost, enormous recurring return. And unlike oil, the demand for clean water only ever goes in one direction. Up, always up. While aid organizations struggle to provide what's needed, investment funds are quantifying the exact price of that need. Blue gold. That's what they call it in the prospectuses, the ones they don't put on their websites. In 2020, water futures began trading on the CME Group for the first time in history. A centuries-old natural right converted into a tradable financial instrument. What was once common, now commodified. The market opened. The bids came in immediately. Indigenous communities have been saying this for generations. Water is not a resource. Water is life. But the new owners of the West Water Table wrote that sentiment off as sentiment. Bolivia's water war of 2000 was a warning the world briefly heard. A private company took control of the municipal supply and tripled prices overnight. People rioted, a man was killed, the contract was canceled. 24 years later, the same model is back. Quieter, bigger, better funded. The Himalayas supply fresh water to 2 billion people. They are called the third pole. They are melting ahead of every model's worst-case projection. The people who bought the water downstream knew this before the models were published. The digital economy consumes water at a scale few understand. One data center drinks what a small city needs every day. AI doesn't run on electricity alone. It runs on water, and the demand is only accelerating. Lake Mead is at its lowest level in recorded history. The Colorado River Compact, a century-old water agreement, is collapsing in real time. 7 states, 40 million people, one failing river, and private interests already positioned at the new pressure points. In São Paulo in 2015, the richest city in South America almost ran out of water, but not the wealthy neighborhoods. They had private tanks, private supply contracts. They were never part of the crisis. They were insulated from it. Kern County, California, ground zero of the water privatization model. One family, the Resnicks, controls more water than most American cities. They grow water-intensive crops in a drought zone, not despite the water crisis, because of it. In 2010, the United Nations declared water a human right. What followed was 14 years of lobbying to define what human right actually means in practice. The answer, increasingly, is whatever the contract says. And who writes the contracts? Cape Town came within weeks of being the first major city to run out of water. Day zero was averted, but not before private water suppliers had already positioned themselves as the long-term solution. Crises don't create these companies, they reveal them. In Texas, water law is unique. Landowners own what's beneath their property, including the water. Pump your neighbor's aquifer dry? Perfectly legal. It's called the rule of capture, and the big players have mastered it. The Ogallala Aquifer took 10,000 years to fill. At current extraction rates, it will be functionally depleted within 25 years. It irrigates 1/3 of all U.S. groundwater irrigated agriculture. When it's gone, the food system changes forever, and someone will sell the alternative. Australia's Murray-Darling water scandal exposed what happens when water is privatized and poorly monitored. Corporations stole billions of liters, on paper, legally, by gaming a trading system designed to protect farmers. The fish died first, then the farms, then the audit began. The returns are extraordinary. The leverage is total. You cannot divest from water the way you can from oil. You cannot find a substitute. You cannot boycott it. That's what makes it the perfect asset. Water has already become a geopolitical weapon. In the Middle East, water access follows power, not geography. The Jordan River is now less than 2% of its historic flow, and control of what remains has been the central tension for decades. Ethiopia's Renaissance Dam has brought Africa to the edge of its first water war. Egypt, which depends entirely on the Nile, has called it an existential threat. Sudan is caught between them. 3 nations, 1 river, no binding agreement. China controls the headwaters of rivers flowing into 12 countries. The Mekong, the Brahmaputra, the Salween, each dam is a tap. Each tap is leverage. Water, for the first time in history, is upstream geopolitics. Microsoft, Google, Meta, they secured long-term water contracts before local governments understood the demand. While citizens fight over allocation, the tech giants are already locked in. 50-year agreements at today's prices, in a world where tomorrow's prices will be unrecognizable. Municipal water privatization has accelerated since 2020. Atlanta, Trenton, Detroit. Cities that couldn't maintain aging infrastructure sold the contracts, and the new owners have one mandate: profit. Part 1 ends where the story actually begins. Not in a drought, not in a boardroom, in the decision made decades ago to let water be owned. What happens next, you were never supposed to know. Chile's 1981 Water Code is considered the world's most privatized water law. Written under Pinochet, advised by the Chicago Boys, water rights separated from land rights and made fully tradable on open markets. A 40-year experiment in what happens when water becomes purely a commodity. In Chile, mining companies hold more water rights than farmers. Farmers hold more than cities. And cities often buy from the same corporations that lobbied to privatize in the first place. This is the closed loop of water capitalism. The World Bank has financed water privatization in over 80 countries as a condition of loans, not a suggestion. Nations drowning in debt handed over water infrastructure to pay down principal. The debt was in dollars. The payment was in water. Two French corporations, Veolia and Suez, control more municipal water than any governments outside China. Their concessions span 149 countries. They are larger than most of the governments whose water they manage. And their shareholders are in the same investment portfolios as everything else. Jakarta is sinking, not metaphorically. The city is physically collapsing due to decades of unregulated groundwater extraction. The government is abandoning it, building a new capital from scratch at a cost of $35 billion. Israel recycles 90% of its wastewater, more than any nation on Earth, but they also export that technology, not as aid, but as contracts, as infrastructure contracts, long-term, binding, revenue-generating. Singapore has no water of its own. It manufactured security through technology and treaties. But even here, the terms of those treaties are the single most sensitive diplomatic nerve in the region. Water security is national security. Fiji water pumps from an aquifer on an island where 12% of residents have no reliable water access. The company was sued by Fiji's government over unpaid water taxes. They threatened to leave. The government settled. The aquifer keeps flowing into bottles, onto luxury shelves. Nestle paid $3.71 for 1 million liters of water in Ontario. A nearby First Nations reserve was under a boil water advisory for years, simultaneously. The same government, two different policies. World leaders receive classified water security briefings. They know the projections and the inevitable outcome. They know the timeline for global depletion. The question is, which side of the acquisition table are they on? The Great Lakes hold 6 quadrillion gallons of fresh water. Every major water corporation in the world has studied extraction scenarios. The Great Lakes Compact is the only thing blocking them, and it is under continuous legal pressure. America's public water infrastructure is crumbling. The American Society of Civil Engineers gives it a D-. Every pipe that fails, every contamination event is a privatization opportunity. When public systems fail, private capital moves in, not to help, but to acquire. The privatization pitch is always the same. We can fix what the government couldn't. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. The same firms managing your pension are managing water infrastructure on 6 continents. Your retirement fund may be earning returns from the water bill of a family in Lagos. The venture capital world has discovered atmospheric water generation. Pulling drinking water from air, it works. At small scale today, at large scale it will be owned, patented, licensed, sold. The Amazon isn't just a forest, it is a water pump. It creates its own rainfall, flying rivers that water Brazil's agriculture. Deforestation doesn't just destroy trees, it destroys water cycles, and someone buys the replacement. The Pentagon has classified water scarcity as a Tier 1 national security threat since 2012. Droughts create migrations. Migrations create conflict. In the Sahel, water conflict events have increased 400% in a decade. This is not coming. It is here. It is happening now. Iraq once sat between 2 rivers, the cradle of civilization. Today, those rivers are controlled upstream by Turkey's dams. Iraq has almost no leverage. It has no water sovereignty. Mesopotamia, the land between 2 rivers, is running dry. China spent $62 billion moving water from south to north, not a pipeline, a 2,500-kilometer canal system. The largest water infrastructure project ever built by any civilization. And it's still not enough. The Indus Waters Treaty has survived 3 wars between India and Pakistan. In 2023, India formally moved to renegotiate it. 230 million Pakistanis depend on Indus River water for food. This treaty is not water policy, it is war prevention. Impact investing in water has reached $40 billion in committed capital. The pitch is always noble, clean water for all. The fine print is always commercial, returns for a few. humanitarian language, financial architecture. Virtual water is the water embedded in everything you trade. When Kenya exports roses to Europe, it exports water. When China imports soybeans from Brazil, it imports water from the Amazon. The global water crisis is being exported and imported through every supply chain. The tech industry's answer to water scarcity is data. AI-optimized irrigation, precision agricultural sensing, real-time aquifer monitoring. Whoever owns the data owns the insight, and insight is leverage. Entire nations are planning their disappearance. The Maldives, Kiribati, Tuvalu, not from poverty, from water. Rising seas on the outside, disappearing freshwater on the inside. World Water Week, the UN's annual water summit, officially attended by governments and scientists. Unofficially, it's the world's most important water business conference. The sponsors shape the agenda shapes the policy. Beneath Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay lies the Guarani Aquifer, the Saudi Arabia of water, enough to supply the world for 200 years. And it is the least studied, least protected, most coveted water body on Earth. In 2005, the United States established a military base in Paraguay. Location, the Mariscal Estigarribia Air Base. Coordinates, directly above the Guarani Aquifer's densest section. No one has officially explained why. The location has not changed. Water litigation has tripled in American courts since 2010. The legal battles are slow, they take decades. But the acquisitions happen fast. By the time courts rule, the deeds are already signed. Saudi Arabia runs out of its own water growing alfalfa in Arizona, exporting water-intensive crops from one of America's driest states to a country that has no water of its own. Legal, approved, ongoing. The UAE has no water, so it bought the technology to make water, and now it's acquiring that technology globally, not just for itself, but for the world. As an export, as leverage, as geopolitical currency, Antarctica holds 70% of the world's fresh water. The Antarctic Treaty prohibits commercial extraction, for now. It expires in 2048, and the legal teams are already building the frameworks. As Arctic ice melts, it reveals two things: new shipping routes and new water. Both of which become immediately valuable. Canada's Arctic contains 20% of the world's fresh water. It knows what that means. Thames Water, London's private water supplier, collapsed into near insolvency, while it paid out $2.7 billion in dividends. Its pipes leaked 25% of all water distributed. This is what private water looks like when the model is taken to its logical conclusion. The solutions exist: restoration, recycling, efficiency, technology. They are not deployed at scale because they reduce scarcity. And reduced scarcity reduces the asset value. Part 2 ends with a question that Part 3 must answer. If the architecture of control is this complete, who owns it? How did they do it? And is there any part of the system they don't yet hold? The global water crisis is a crisis of ownership. The tipping point arrives quietly, then all at once. One dry season, one failed harvest, one broken pipe. And what was a slow crisis becomes an overnight emergency. Global headlines confirm the reckoning. Aerial banking hard over a refugee column on foot, crossing a dry riverbed, becomes an overnight emergency. When it arrives, the emergency protocols feel insufficient. Aerial over a military water distribution convoy deploying to a U.S. city under emergency declaration. Not for structural scarcity, the emergency protocols feel insufficient. Not for permanent re-engineering of supply, not for temporary disruptions. Monterrey, population 5 million, GDP 150 billion. In 2022, it had water for 8 hours every 3 days. Residents stood in lines with empty buckets. Mexico's wealthiest industrial city. Offices closed, water systems offline. And it was days from complete collapse. Chennai, India's 4th largest city, 2019, one failed harvest, one broken pipe, day 0 crisis. 4 reservoirs, all empty, simultaneously, no water for 2 months. The IT sector that drives a billion-dollar economy was importing water by the truckload. Water ministry officials looking at satellite images of empty reservoirs, a billion-dollar economy on the brink. The new water crisis isn't just scarcity, it's extremes. Feast and famine, a flood that fills nothing, a drought that empties everything. A wide aerial of a monsoon flooding event in Bangladesh, an entire delta region submerged in brown floodwater. Hydro extremes, more floods and more droughts simultaneously, same regions, within months. A flood that fills nothing, a drought that empties everything. The old climate infrastructure is failing. Permafrost thaw releases ancient water, land collapsing, but not usably, contaminated by millennia of frozen organic decay. It also releases methane, accelerating the warming that releases more permafrost. A loop closing on a civilization still arguing about whether it's real. Wide establishing aerial of the Tigris-Euphrates system, the cradle of civilization, now under severe stress. The Iraqi marshlands are disappearing again, upstream Turkish dams from climate change. From upstream dams, from climate change, traditional fishing culture disappearing, from the compounding weight of every water decision made above them, failed, marked inconclusive. California's water rights system dates to the gold rush, a maze of channels and pumps. Competing claimants, farmers, cities, environmentalists, corporations, arguing over every drop. A priority chart, first in time, first in right, showing rights dating back to 1851. Legal taking while neighbors die. In a drought year, those rights can be worth more than the land itself, and they are being systematically purchased. The story of water ownership is deliberately hard to tell. Shell companies, offshore trusts, multi-layered subsidiaries, heavily redacted water data from a municipal utility. The ownership structures are deliberately opaque. Aerial over a water utility company campus, cameras on every corner, no public information boards visible, multi-layered subsidiaries. The water is in the ground. The owner is in the Cayman Islands. A breakthrough in the investigation. The massive water footprint of animal agriculture made visible from altitude, sprawling complexes, hundreds of thousands of cattle, water consumption staggering. The American diet is water intensive. 1,800 gallons for 1 pound of beef. Staggering. Chicken ke liye 460 gallon. The Ogallala is being drawn dry for corn to feed cows, a vast green monoculture. Livestock, soy, and water rights portfolios side by side. Professional infrastructure. Aerial over a water-intensive data center complex in the desert. 3 buildings consuming a city's worth of water daily. Google consumed 6.4 billion gallons of water in 2022. Microsoft consumed 1.7 billion. This is infrastructure. The water flowing out barely resembles the water flowing in. It is infrastructure, and it is growing. The Dead Sea is dying, dropping a full meter every year, fastest shrinking lake on Earth. It has lost a third of its surface area in 3 decades. Abandoned resort hotels now kilometers inland. The Earth collapsing where the water table has retreated. Sinkholes swallowing the shore. A $10 billion intervention to save it, still unbuilt, for agriculture, for cities. Cinematic drone push into the heart of Las Vegas. Fountains, pools, the Bellagio water show. Aerial reveal of Las Vegas from altitude. Golf courses green in the desert, surrounded by brown. But the spectacle continues, the fountains keep running for the visitors. Turf removal required. Casino fountains continue exempt. A desert city in denial. By 2024, 847 recorded water point conflict incidents in East Africa alone. Herders with rifles, farmers with machetes. Drone tracking a column of Sudanese refugees following a water conflict displacement. Dust and exhaustion. A slow-motion war fought at every well, every single day. The true cost of water is the future of those who fight for it. UN peacekeepers on perimeter. Cinematic aerial over New Delhi, a city of 33 million with groundwater tables falling 2 feet per year. Tanker trucks arriving at apartment complexes, residents lowering buckets. One of the world's largest cities is slowly losing its aquifer. The boreholes go deeper every year, until there is nowhere deeper to go. Until there is nowhere deeper to go. No more water left. Wide establishing aerial of São Paulo's metropolitan reservoirs, multiple systems, all simultaneously stressed. A citywide rationing map, the outer ring's deepest red, crisis generation and exploitation, bottled water sales tripled, owned by the same funds that invested in Scarcity, vertically integrated. The companies were owned by the same funds that had invested in the water scarcity models, vertically integrated. In 2023, the UN Security Council discussed water as security for the first time. Flags of 193 nations, the Secretariat windows lit late into the night, crisis sessions, water access as a matter of international peace and security, that is the language of force. P5 representatives speaking quietly, no cameras allowed, not as development, as security. Istanbul, a city that straddles 2 continents, ancient water infrastructure still holding water. Istanbul's modern water management crisis center, screens showing citywide pressure maps. 45 days between normal and catastrophe, 45 days between normal and catastrophe. For 16 million people, a clock ticking. Istanbul, a megacity of 16 million. Supply infrastructure from another era, low water levels. Wildfires don't just burn trees, they destroy watershed catchment function, smoke pillowing. Soot and ash contaminate reservoirs for years. Charred hills, debris flows entering a municipal reservoir. Every fire is both a water crisis and a water privatization opportunity. Sample failing, levels off the chart. Emergency contract awarded, cost $800 million. Private operator selected. The price of clean water rises as the forests fall. The ultra-wealthy are building private water systems, not as paranoia, as rational planning. Underground cisterns, solar pump systems, visible self-sufficiency infrastructure, rational planning. The ultra-wealthy are building private water systems. They know the public system's timeline. An island of security in a sea of scarcity, private aquifer access, self-contained water system, 15,000 glacial lakes in the Himalayas, swelling faster than we can track. A Nepali valley being prepared for GLOF, glacial lake outburst flood early warning infrastructure. Thousands of homes, no flood wall. You cannot outrun it. You can barely detect it in time. The ice is turning into an ocean above our heads. Undeniable acceleration. A desert city behaving like a coastal one, golf courses, swimming pools, paradox of excess. Officials showing new desalination plant proposals, funding gaps visible. The city issues permits. The Water Authority issues futures on a ghost river, purchasing water 20 years forward. 50,000 homes approved in a water-limited basin. Someone else will sell the solution. Women and girls collect water, 200 million hours per day globally, areas of complete darkness. Every hour collecting water is an hour not in school. Women walking 5 kilometers each way, not in school, not in work, not building anything, just surviving, 200 million hours per day. The time she lost from school, not in work, not building anything, just surviving. Switzerland has something rare, a population that decided collectively that water belongs to everyone. The same spring, now behind a production line, a community that chose not to sell, decided collectively that water belongs to everyone, by law, by culture, by constitution. A federated system where each community owns its share. A model for a world that has forgotten how to share. The Rhine hit historic low water levels in 2022. Cargo ships couldn't move, chemical plants shut down. Cargo ships stranded, sandbars exposed, commerce halted, an economy that stops, skipping a pulse. German logistics companies on phones, supply chains breaking. A river too low to navigate is an economy that stops. Rhine low water events now economically equivalent to major supply shocks. The heartbeat of Europe skipping a pulse. In the United States, a utility can legally shut off water for non-payment. Record profits for those doing the cutting. Residents with no water, children, elderly, visible desperation, billions in profit for the utility. The average cutoff balance? Under $1,000. This is the system working as designed for the owners. Annual shareholder meeting happening miles away. Record profits, applause, the company doing the cutting. Detroit, a city built on water access, now fighting in court for residents' right to keep theirs, thousands of marchers. Attorneys preparing a class action against a municipal water utility, fighting in court for residents' right to keep theirs. Fighting in court for residents' right to keep theirs, human rights violations in the heart of the Great Lakes, the wealthiest water region on Earth, the poorest water access in the nation, built on the Great Lakes. The world's experts, urgency in every discussion. Instead of retreating, they invented a water culture. The wet gets wetter, the dry gets drier, every projection. The infrastructure built for the old climate cannot handle the new. Instead of retreating, they invented a water culture, not a commodity, an infrastructure of survival. Storm surge barriers, movable walls large enough to protect a city from the sea, not a commodity, an infrastructure of survival. The first water wars are not coming, they are being fought. Herders with rifles, farmers with machetes, burned out canal diversion station, infrastructure sabotage, the physical mark of water war in the Sahel in Yemen. A UN peacekeeping patrol monitoring a contested water point in Mali. Small conflicts, poorly covered. Regions at highest risk highlighted in deep red. Small conflicts, quickly forgotten, each one a preview. The water industry spent $47 million lobbying Congress in a single year, expensive venues, hidden privatization, to shape infrastructure bills, water rights amendments. They wrote the rules while paying the people. The same faces from previous hearings, water industry attorneys, they wrote the rules Built with federal infrastructure money, operated for private profit. Public money, private profit. The Panama Canal runs on fresh water. In 2023, a drought cut canal capacity by 40%. Global trade backed up. Gatun Lake, the freshwater reservoir that operates the canal's locks, visibly diminished. Route adjustments, cost overruns. Route adjustments, cost overruns, the canal's crisis on every screen. The entire world's supply chain depends on one lake. Canal drought restrictions 2023. Global trade cost $3.2 billion, a fragile machine. Maps, war game scenarios, academics, and former military officers. Water infrastructure is most vulnerable. State and non-state actor water infrastructure attacks. A hacker tried to increase sodium hydroxide to lethal levels. Critical infrastructure visible from above, terrifyingly exposed, physical, cyber, chemical, screens monitoring for intrusion attempts. Water infrastructure is among the most vulnerable to attack. Physical, cyber, chemical. Pipes ruptured, contaminated water flowing freely, aid workers navigating rubble. 90% of disaster deaths. Outbreak response in a displacement camp. Water testing, medical response, fear, flood, drought, contamination. 90% of all natural disaster deaths are water-related, through flood, drought, or contamination. Every disaster requires reconstruction. Reconstruction contracts go to whoever is positioned and ready. The disaster economy is a liquid one. The Colorado River is legally allocated for 20% more than it has, barely reaching the Gulf. A 100-year-old Western Water Compact document, allocations made for a river that no longer has that volume. Tracking shot through a Colorado River Compact renegotiation. States, tribes, federal officials, lawyers. Once a lush ecosystem, now largely sand, a trickle reaching the sea. A ghost river haunting a desert. This is where part 3 ends, not with a villain in a boardroom, but with a burning horizon. But with hands cupped, empty, waiting, the moment the dry becomes permanent. The moment a decision is made that will affect millions, the dry becomes permanent, cupped, empty, waiting, not with a villain in a boardroom, but with hands cupped, empty, waiting, wait for the reckoning.
Every crisis contains within it the seed of its own resolution. This is not ideology, it is evidence. Not individual, not corporate. Collective, constitutional, civilizational. In 2004, Uruguay voted, by referendum, to make water a constitutional right. Private companies were removed from the water supply. The system is publicly owned, democratically managed, and it works, by every metric, reliably. Paris privatized its water in 1985, remunicipalized it in 2010. The result? Bills dropped 8% the first year. Service improved, transparency increased. They made the data public, and the data was better. 267 cities in 37 countries have remunicipalized their water since 2000. It is evidence, it is proof, it is not ideology. The evidence says public water works better than private water for most people. From the ashes of the Cochabamba water war came the Cochabamba Declaration. Water is a fundamental human right and a public trust to be guarded by all people. Not for sale, not for profit. For everyone, without exception. Technology can solve the water crisis, but only if the solution is shared. Not patented, not licensed exclusively. Transferred, openly, as public good. Regenerative agriculture can make farming water positive. Not just efficient, generative. Not just efficient, generative. Returning water to aquifers instead of depleting them. The technology exists. The will to require it is the missing part. Amsterdam is designing water out of the waste stream. Every liter used, captured, cleaned, reused. Energy extracted from sewage, nutrients from wastewater, water that was a cost becoming a resource cycle. Seoul spent $350 million restoring a stream. They tore up a highway to do it. Urban water restoration is not just environmental, it is economic, it is psychological, it works. The answers are not always new. The Inca built water harvesting systems 1,000 years ago that are being rediscovered and outperforming modern infrastructure. Ancient knowledge, ignored for centuries, quietly correct all along. Wangari Maathai understood before the scientists published it. Plant trees, water follows, plant trees. Plant trees, water follows. 50 million trees, restored rivers, changed lives. One woman, one movement, a continent paying attention. The Loess Plateau in China was so eroded it was considered unreclaimable. 35,000 square kilometers restored. Water tables recovered, communities rebuilt, food security returned. The planet can heal, if we choose to let it. The Valencia Water Tribunal has met every Thursday for 1,000 years. Farmers decide water disputes together. Farmers decide water disputes together. No lawyers, no courts, transparency and community accountability. It is the oldest functioning democratic institution in Europe. In 2017, New Zealand gave a river legal personhood. The Wanganui River can now sue. It can be sued on behalf of. It has rights, legal, enforceable. This is what it looks like when a civilization decides nature is not property. Ecuador wrote nature into its constitution. Rivers, forests, ecosystems. With rights, with standing, with protection. A country said we are part of it, not above it. The framework for a different system exists. Universal access, equitable pricing, prohibited speculation, democratic governance, technology sharing, nature's rights. The pieces are there. What's missing is the political will to assemble them. Change moves from the ground up. The ground up. Change moves from the ground up. Communities winning back their water. Winning back. Communities winning back their water. One contract, one vote, one case at a time. The arc of water justice is long, but it bends when pushed. When communities control their water, everything changes. Girls go to school, farms produce more, health improves, economies grow. Not because of a billion-dollar fund, because of a well-placed, community-owned. The Yakama Nation has managed Columbia River water for 10,000 years. When the courts finally upheld their water rights, the salmon returned. Because the people who understood the river were finally allowed to protect it. Finland has the cleanest public water in the world. Publicly owned, democratically governed, transparent. They also export the technology globally. But the infrastructure at home stays public. That is a choice, a deliberate one. The financial system is not fixed, but it is not immovable. Pension funds can divest from speculative water holdings. Governments can terminate privatization contracts. Governments can terminate privatization contracts. Constitutions can be amended. These things happen. They have happened. New models are being built. New models are being built. Not charity, not exploitation, not charity. Not charity, not exploitation. Partnership, technology transfer, community ownership. The design is different when the people living with it are at the table. Water is not a commodity. Water is not a commodity. It is a cycle. It belongs to no one. It belongs to everything. The question isn't who owns it. The question is whether we're willing to say no one can. Transparency is the first weapon. Transparency is the first weapon. Naming the owners, mapping the structures, making the invisible visible, the invisible visible. The public cannot contest what it cannot see. The children being born today will inherit the water decisions being made right now. They deserve to know what those decisions are. They deserve to understand what water is. Not a bill, not a commodity, a birthright. Wetlands are nature's water infrastructure. Wetlands are nature's water infrastructure. They absorb floods, filter water, sequester carbon, protect coastlines. When we drain them, we lose all of that. When we drain them, we lose all of that. When we restore them, we get it all back, for free. The Murray-Darling is healing, not perfectly, not fast enough, but the political decision to restore environmental flows is producing measurable ecological recovery. Year by year, information changes people. People change decisions. Decisions change systems. This film is not the end of the story. You are. Water doesn't know about ownership. Water doesn't know about ownership. It falls, it flows, it evaporates, it returns. It has done this for 4 billion years. The question is what we will do in the next 50. 71% of the earth is covered in water. 97% of it is salt. Of the remaining 3%, most is locked in ice. What is left, what we are fighting over, is less than 1% of a planet made of water. Both futures are visible from here. The green one and the cracked one. Both are being built simultaneously. Both are being built simultaneously. The difference is which one we're willing to fight for. It is not impossible. Cities with clean, universal, publicly managed water exist. They are not accidents. They are decisions defended over time. This is what we are talking about. Not commodities, not futures, not contracts. Rivers, rain, springs, lakes. The oldest thing on this planet. The only thing we cannot replace. This is what we are talking about. The billionaires are buying the water, but they don't own the movement. They don't own the knowledge. They don't own the knowledge. They don't own the vote. They don't own the vote. Water has survived every extinction, every ice age, every drought, every civilization that rose and fell on its banks. The question is not whether water will survive us. The question is whether we will prove worthy of it. 1 in 3 people on Earth lack access to safe drinking water. The water exists. The will to share it is what's missing.